And early on in my term, we were talking about an annex, believe it or not. So,
Really?
yeah, that's how long this goes back. Well, I have official time of 6 o'clock, so if you'll all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, we'll open tonight's meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight on this special meeting of the Clinton County Council, and thank you for those that may be watching online as we kick off a couple of very important projects here that the county proposes to move forward with. So our purpose here tonight is to conduct a public hearing as we begin the process of making determinations and knocking the steps, checking the boxes of moving forward with a construction project, 2 construction projects to be more specific. One, as you may be aware, the building of a new county annex adjacent to the courthouse across the street on the west side of the square, north side of the square, I'm sorry, and then also renovating this building, the county courthouse, to give it its sort of generational update to keep it in tip-top shape for service to the community. So to get more specific about our purpose tonight, I'm going to ask, to start the meeting tonight, I'm going to ask Zach Klutz with Taft Law, it's bond counsel for Clinton County, to maybe say a few words with about the process and what we're hoping to accomplish tonight.
Sure. Good evening, Council. My name is Zach Klutz with the Taft Law Firm, and as Alan said, we have been engaged to be bond counsel for the issuance of bonds to support these 2 projects. So I'll just give you a summary as to why we're here and why we're having a special meeting. The 2 projects that you are considering will be supported indirectly through a property tax levy. And because each of the projects are above a certain threshold in terms of cost, the Indiana Code requires you to conduct 2 public hearings before you make a determination to move forward. So tonight represents the first public hearing. I envision after this kind of summary for the other professionals to kind of give their summary of the project, both in terms of kind of the brick and mortar and also in terms of the financing. And then we'll probably open the hearing or open the meeting to the public for any comment. And then at the conclusion, there will be an introduction of the resolution, which is the determination to move forward. Will simply be an introduction. This will allow you to review the resolution between now and your next meeting. The next public hearing that we're going to have on this will be at your regular meeting, February 14th. We wanted to maintain as many regular scheduled meetings as we could, but we also thought it was important to have a meeting at after hours, so to speak, so that we gave the public an evening and a morning time to participate in these public hearings. So after the public hearings are concluded on February 14th, you'll be asked to consider and vote upon a resolution making the determination to move forward with the projects. And if you do that, the next steps will be to then begin considering the underlying approvals for the bond and, in this case, a lease financing. And we'll go through those when the time comes. I view this as the preliminary first step that is required because we are using property taxes to support the debt service on these projects. So the next step, assuming you adopt the preliminary resolution, we will get into the bond documents and the approvals, and we'll have actually another public hearing to approve those and allow the public to comment. There will be 2 different notices notifying the public that if you do approve these. So after the February 14th meeting, if that preliminary determination resolution is passed, we'll publish a notice that the resolution was passed and you've made a preliminary determination to move forward. That provides a window of time for any objections. And then once we get into the resolutions authorizing the debt and the lease, and we'll fully explain those as we move forward, there'll be another opportunity for public hearing and another notice published. So that's why we're here tonight, is to just kind of kick off this process.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
So as Zach referenced, we've got a couple of different angles to view this project tonight. Let's start. I'm going to ask Dale Davis with Envoy to step to the microphone and talk a little bit about, as Zach described it, the brick and mortar part of the project. What are we proposing to do in terms of the actual construction and design?
Yeah, and thank you for having me. Again, my name is Dale Davis. I'm the Director of Planning for Envoy. We're a construction firm based out of Indianapolis. The county has retained us to help really understand these two important projects, to understand the needs of both buildings, to really think through what the next 30 years holds for them, to do this right and do it once. So with that long-term vision in hand, we've brought a team of design professionals from RQAW, RC engineers, JPS, as well as multiple other consulting groups to help us really understand these buildings. And, you know, doing these two projects, though they're completely independent and could ultimately function without one another, there are a lot of efficiencies to doing them back to back. Our design scope, our, you know, ability to house people, it all really, it helps us a lot to do them back to back, even though they could function perfectly well without one another. So the last work that was done was about 30 years ago. It was in the early 90s. So we are at that point where we need to take a look at the buildings. And to start, we'll start with this courthouse. If you'd hit the next slide, please. So this courthouse really is a beautiful building. It's a great community asset, and we need to do what we can to preserve it and keep it going for the next 30 years. So we also have some space needs for the county, specifically the courts. We need another courtroom. And the way the jury rooms on the third floor work needs some rework. There's some ADA issues throughout the building, particularly with the bathrooms. That is something we are going to address through this project as part of you know, every community. You know, it's on them to bring the buildings up to ADA standards, and that is what we're going to do. So we're also looking at how do we modernize the systems in this building. We're talking HVAC. I mean, I look at the controllers on the wall. Those aren't even serviced anymore. So we need to think about, you know, all those next steps. Keep the building comfortable, keep it safe, and keep it structurally sound. So we have some conditions photos here. Again, beautiful building, but if you start looking closely at the pictures, you start to notice that there's some deterioration going on, particularly on the exterior. The interior of the building is actually in pretty good shape. We do need carpet and paint throughout. As I mentioned, the bathrooms definitely need updated. There are some space needs for us to address. If you'd hit the next slide, please. So to zoom in and just kind of show what we've seen. So we brought in RC engineers. They specialize in this kind of historic preservation and assessment. And they will be drawing up a full set of plans for us to bring the exterior back up to what it once was. And also to stabilize it, if you'd hit the next. So particularly with the roofing, the limestone, the exterior masonry, there's a lot of smaller items that need to be addressed. The problem is those smaller items add up. And getting to them is very tricky. So to get to the exterior of the structure, after the evaluation, we learned we're going to have to scaffold the building, which is almost $1 million cost. So to do that and to bring in the specialists that we need to do that work, it's important to do all the work at once. You don't want to pay for that scaffolding twice. So it's our professional opinion to do everything that was within RC's report. Now, the good news is, in RC's report, there's only a few things that have to be addressed immediately, and we will address those. But the bulk of the report, the time frame is 3 to 5 years. So by the time the annex is built and we start on this work, it will be needed. This photo is kind of particular importance. This is a unique roofing system. I mean, I know it looks just like standing seam metal roof, but it's actually galvanized with lead. So we can save it, but we have to remediate the lead and then recoat it. So there's items like that as we work through the building that just make it a little bit more specialized. There's also some deterioration up on the tower as well. So this will address that, keep that tower nice and good for the next generation is our goal. Next slide, if you would, please. So, again, just to summarize the courthouse, the interior renovations, though extensive, they're not significant budgetary hurdles. It's that exterior that really drives up the cost. Now to talk about the annex. So this was the former Regions Bank building, and we've brought in structural engineers, asbestos abatement professionals, mold professionals. I mean, we've really evaluated this building thoroughly. To give a little background on it, this building's 3, possibly 4 buildings that have been stitched together over time. So it's a very inefficient layout inside. And there's also quite a few different floor and ceiling height combinations in that building. I think there's at least 12 different combinations, which means almost every hallway in this building is going to need to have a slope to it so that you can get between the spaces and maintain ADA. These were things we'd all planned through, but as with the design professionals that I mentioned earlier, but as we started pulling the layers off and looking into each individual thing we found with the building, we started finding some issues that were really going to end up being costly. For example, we'll have to do new HVAC throughout the building. It means we have to put 30 or 40,000 pounds worth of HVAC equipment on the roof of this building. That roof's probably not going to hold it. And this is, depending on which part of the building you're talking about, it's a pocket kind of structural masonry wall system where the floor joists are pocketed in. So if we're going to shore this up to hold that much weight, you're going to have to run all the way down to the basement and essentially put a skeleton inside of the building. There is asbestos throughout. The report identified mostly in the basement some areas that have to be abated no matter what. Before the building can be demoed, before it can be renovated, it has to be done, and we're getting professionals in to help us take care of that first and foremost. But when we started digging into all these, the cost really started adding up significantly. So much so that for 20% more than our original cost just to do a renovation of this building, and when I say a renovation, I mean we will make it work, but it's not going to necessarily be the perfect systems you might want for a new building. It'll be climate controlled, absolutely. But due to height restrictions and layout restrictions and all the thick masonry walls, we're going to have to make some compromises to make it work. But all that added up to the point that for 20% more, that building could be replaced by a 2-story brand new annex. And in doing so, that brings more cost certainty to the project. It brings a much better long-term hold for the community. Because to think about this, okay, we're here in 30 years again, and we're talking about the next generation. That building would likely need the same investment, if not more, because just of how it's laid out. A modern steel building, it's pretty much an open balloon on the inside. You can shift walls around, rearrange at a much lower cost to the community. That will also be much more energy efficient. It'll just be more efficient in every way. So it was our recommendation that we were so close on cost, and if you would, I have some condition photos. This is our street side, our other street side. Here's where I can dive into some of the conditions. This is underneath the first floor if you're down in the basement. You can see that floor plate's rusting away and crumbling. That's going to be difficult to fix. We can do it, but it's going to be difficult. Excuse me. Next slide, please. Here's some other conditions photos. The basement has a significant water infiltration issue. And I don't know if anybody's dealt with that in their home before, but addressing it from the inside is never going to give you a 100% solution. We can make it a lot better, but it's never going to be as good as digging up around the perimeter and actually coating it properly, which in this building's configuration would be incredibly difficult. Also, it's kind of hard to see in the photo, but the masonry between those windows is actually bowing out quite a bit. And as I mentioned before, this is a structural masonry building, so that's not as simple as just pushing it back in. That's a structural issue now. So we started finding all these issues, and again, for a smaller cost premium, we can go to a new building. However, that's taken into account. We do our best to estimate everything that we might find along the way. We put in different placeholders for the asbestos remediation, for the structural systems, but these are all assumptions, and we had not taken the walls down on the inside of this building yet. So we do our best to make the correct assumptions, but we have no plans for these buildings, so we're working on assumptions. So that 20% that I'm talking for a new structure could easily be eaten up once those walls come down and we understand what's going on in there. So it was our proposal that new build is the way to go. So if you would, on the next slide. So this is a rendering that our architect, RQAW, is pulled together. Now, in talking with the leadership here, we proposed that, well, for an additional space, we can add a third floor to this building, give the community an extra 13,000 square feet of space. Now I know a lot of companies will say, well, we can structure it to add the third floor at a future date, but nobody ever does that. It's extremely expensive. It's hard. You can't really add a third floor to an elevator. I mean, it's not the best solution. But in doing this, we'll give the county the space they need to continue to grow. We'll provide, it also provides other opportunities for that third floor space, should you, want to use it however you wish. Be it another department moving in, be it, space to share with the community and rent. I mean, there's lots of opportunities there. So I know there's a question, I'm sure, in everybody's mind of, well, this was a bank before. Why is this so cost prohibitive? Why is this so, why can't people just move in tomorrow? The building's not in that great of shape, and it was going to be an issue for the people in there pretty soon. The HVAC in that building had to be residential units to actually make the weight work. They didn't really have great climate control in there. The plumbing, I mean, there's a double layer ceiling on each floor, and we can't see through the second layer, so we're not necessarily sure what's up there either. In this way, we don't have to worry about the lead, the water infiltration, the asbestos. It will all be taken care of. We don't have to cap any of it in place. It'll all be gone. So again, it was just the best opportunity for the community. Again, we wanted to give you that lasting community asset that we were asked to provide. So to go through, and there's a parking lot behind this that there's currently a teller in. We will be removing that teller, filling in the hole, restriping that lot. We'll almost be able to double the parking in that parking lot. So we'll be able to help with that as well. And just to give a little background, this is being procured through the build, operate, transfer process, which honestly puts a lot of the risk on the developer. So once we get through design, we will present a guaranteed maximum price, and unless the scope changes, that's the cost for the project. So it's a procurement method we use quite a lot on municipal deliveries, and it's very effective, and it gives a lot of certainty to the community. So just wanted to give a little plug there. We're far away from that step. We need to finish our construction drawings first, but we are moving in that direction. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but also know Baker Tilly has some more information to provide.
Any questions for Dale before we move on?
Dale, I know one thing that's been brought up to me is how long you think, or you have an approximate timeline, how long the new building would last? Seems like everybody says 30 years. Well, 30 years goes by pretty quick.
No, the new building would far outlast that. I can't really quote an age, but it should last the next 2, if not 3 generations. I mean, it's going to be a masonry exterior with structural steel framing and concrete and reinforced basement. It should last as long as everything around it.
Good question. Anybody else? Thank you, Dale.
Thank you.
Great summary. Now, what I think everybody really wants to know, Dale, is how much is it going to cost and how are we going to pay for it? So for that, we're going to bring our financial advisor to the microphone, Emma Adlin with Baker Tilly.
Thanks, Alan. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. My name is Emma Adlam. I'm a director at Baker Tilly. And thank you. So this shows the estimated project costs and funding. So to Alan's point, really kind of what is the estimated cost for these 2 projects? For the courthouse, it is an estimated cost of $9,833,000. For the annex building, it is an estimated cost of $17,440,000. For financing this project, we're looking at a combination of both issuing bonds and using some cash on hand at the county. You can go back.
Okay.
Sorry, go back. Yep, thank you. For the estimated par amount of the bonds, we're looking at $23,640,000. And then assuming the county contributes $5 million of cash on hand from your ARPA allocation. Now, all of these costs, of course, are subject to change. As Dale mentioned, they're still working on their drawings, and it is all dependent on that guaranteed maximum price that comes to the county. So the bonds wouldn't be sold until you knew what that number was, so that the par amount will be structured appropriately. You're not issuing too much or too little.
Emma, can I interrupt just for those that may be watching that aren't familiar with some of our acronyms that we throw around? ARPA being American Recovery Plan Act, or the more commonly known as the stimulus, the federal stimulus. So Clinton County received $6.3 million of spendable dollars from that federal stimulus program, of which we have voted to allocate $5 million to this project. So that's where that $5 million of local funds comes from.
Thank you, Alan. If you could go to the next slide. So this, there's a lot of information on this page, but the chart shows the summary of the estimated bond payments. So this would be we're proposing a 20-year term, lease rental bond structure that Zach alluded to earlier, and it's payable from a property tax levy. So based on those costs that we talked about on the prior slide, we're looking at annual payments of about $2,040,000. And that's, of course, dependent on the actual interest rate that you would get. But that's based on current rates plus a fair amount of cushion built in. So hopefully this is a conservative estimate. And currently the county does not have a property tax debt service levy in place. And so this would mean a property tax increase of just under 11 cents. So the last slide I have is what's the taxpayer impact of this just over $2 million payment. So depending on where this property is located, every property is subject to tax caps in Indiana. And so depending on where the property is, this taxpayer may or may not already be hitting their tax cap. So this chart assumes they're under the tax cap. This doesn't take into account, some taxpayers may not see an increase at all if they're already at their cap. This looks at kind of working from the left to the right. We have 4 illustrative home values. So from a range of $75,000 to $225,000, the impact would be about $14.60 up to a little over $100 annually. And going more to the right, 1 acre of agricultural land is about just over $2 per acre, and then 100,000 of commercial or rental property would be about $107 annually. So that is the last slide of the financing, but I'm happy to answer any questions about either the bond structure or the property tax impact. As Zach mentioned, we'll be coming to you. This is just the first step in the process. So as the bond approvals start, we can have more information and answer, any questions that come up after today's meeting too.
I really appreciate the information given to us so clearly so that we can answer our constituents' questions
Thank you.
very easily. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Carol, I'm glad you said that. That does bring up a point I want to make, that we do have available kind of a summary sheet that's, that meets the statutorily required data that needs to be made available to all taxpayers. And so we have copies of those here tonight if anybody would want it. We have copies that I'll make sure we leave some at the auditor's office, that if anybody would like to get a copy, or we could have it emailed or whatever. But we will have a summary of these numbers available to the public.
I have a question. I'm just assuming that this is based on where we are today with our net assessed value in the county. And that and my thought is won't it change as time goes by, as we bring online new economic developments, which our leadership has worked very hard to bring into the community? We haven't maybe quite seen the positive impact yet.
Yeah, great question. So talk about net assessed value growth generally, all of these numbers assume based on just your current 2023 assessed value. To be conservative, we like to show you kind of a not as rosy picture. As your net assessed value increases, this tax rate will decrease because you need a smaller tax rate to generate the same levy. So as you do have more economic growth, that will lower the tax impact, with the caveat of if you do capture any economic development in a TIF area, that does not help reduce this levy because it would be captured separately as TIF.
Good question.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So you're saying a TIF area would not impact this?
If you, for a TIF area, that any new development that does not exist now, that we're not counting on any growth in
I
assessed
see.
value.
Got it.
So any new increase captured by a TIF,
It accrues to a separate pot.
yeah,
Right.
you do get those funds, but it
I
just.
knew they went to a separate
Yeah.
pot, but it wouldn't change the
No.
information you've given us, your assumptions.
No.
All right, great. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you.
So with that information as background, what I'd like to do now is actually open the public hearing and ask if anyone has comment. A public hearing is an opportunity for the public to give feedback to the council. It's a dialogue, and it's the opportunity for you to speak back to us. Does anybody here tonight wish to speak to the project? Yeah, and if you would, go to the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Council, for allowing us this opportunity to speak tonight, especially bringing in this meeting in the evening. I think it's a great idea. My name is Dan Sheets. I'm a county surveyor, also a taxpayer, and I support this project, both the renovation of this building and the demolition of the Regions Bank. I was in that bank last summer, I guess, and it makes no sense whatsoever to try to rehabilitate that building. I know we did have some plans that would work, but the costs, the unknown costs were going to be the big problem.
Yeah.
And I think we could easily see that increase at least $2 million as you get into that project. I think it makes absolute sense. You're planning for the future. In 1992, I think it was, council and commissioners looked at this project, building an annex over here across the street. Ultimately, they did not do that. They chose to remodel this building. That got us down the road 30 years. But to go in there and try to remodel that 100-year-old plus 4 buildings doesn't make any sense. I think will easily save money in the long run, just in the economics of the new systems in there, HVAC, communications, all of that, the data stuff. So I think it's a very important project for our community. Thank the council for looking at this. I would encourage you as a taxpayer to move forward with this. It will impact me, my family, but you're planning for the future. I think you'll easily get another 100 years out of this new building, without question, with modern construction techniques. And I think it's important to renovate this building. It's a beautiful building. I've enjoyed working in here, but it needs a lot of work to preserve it for the future. So thank you, and I encourage you to vote for this project.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks, Dan. Anyone else?
All right, I'm Brad Moeller, Circuit Court Judge. I'm going to keep my phone here because we actually have a jury trial going on right now as we speak. I just gave a case to a jury, and I'll keep track to see if anything happens. But as judge and again as a taxpayer, I appreciate this building. It is a unique building. I think it's something we can all be proud of. I've been in a lot of courtrooms throughout the state, and I like the old courtroom style. I think what we see in this building with the woodwork, with the spiral staircase, with the courtrooms, to me, that's what a courtroom should look like. And so I appreciate the efforts at preserving this building, continuing to improve it and make it usable for the next many years. We've had a lot of attorneys from out of town come in and comment on our courtrooms. Before my time, we had some come in and actually film their TV commercials in circuit court because it just has that look of what I think people expect a courtroom to be. And we want to preserve that. It doesn't mean it doesn't need some improvements. I've been in practice since 97. I was here in 95, 96 working. I don't think we've really had, other than a coat of paint, anything change in the courtroom, in circuit court at least. So it definitely needs updated. The whole jury complex, which is behind circuit court, definitely needs updated. You know, we ran a jury, when we start a jury trial, we may have anywhere from 50 to 75 people during that initial part of a jury selection. And we want to keep them together for reasons of protecting the case and making sure there's not any outside influence. As we go through that jury selection, that number whittles down to a 12-person jury. But when we take breaks, right now we have 2 restroom stalls to try to get 50 to 75 people through, and it just takes a lot of time. So certainly in that back area, the whole jury set of rooms or suite needs updated and improvements. Additionally, we want to expand those jury rooms to give the jury more space, update it with some technology. But I think all of those things are doable in keeping this building functional as a courthouse and then expanding into an annex for the other offices. So I appreciate the efforts to preserve the courts in this building. I think that's important.
Thank you, Judge.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've worked on this project very closely with our colleagues and the commissioners, and I'd like to ask Commissioner President Jordan Brewer if he'd like to make a comment.
Real short. Good evening. Thank you. I appreciate the presentation, and obviously I've been involved in this project since its beginning, and so it's has a real sentimental value to me, and I think we have great professionals that have been working with us to move this forward. And I'll build off a little bit of what Dan said, because a former counselor had given me a document from 1997, and all of the issues that were highlighted today were highlighted in 1997, and nothing was done. And so now we're here 26 years later with the opportunity to continue to move our community forward. And to me, this is a foundational project. It's generational, and it's what Clark had mentioned about economic development. It's something that will continue to enhance the economic development of this community. We will now have a place to bring business managers and opportunities to meet with them and show them. And I think we have a responsibility, although we're the county, to continue to revitalize our downtown. And so rather than allowing these buildings to become dilapidated and run down, let's continue to invest in it, because it helps everyone, not just the city of Frankfort, but Clinton County as a whole. And so those, to me, are a lot of the main reasons why we're doing this, outside of all the issues that were highlighted. But ultimately, I think this is going to be something that we can be proud of as taxpayers, and that we can look as continuing to build on what we're doing, because there's been so many good things over the last 5 or 6 years, and even before that, but definitely the last 5 or 6, and 3 that I've been involved at, we're kind of moving this community forward. So this is just the next step, and we'll provide that foundation.
Thank you, Jordan. Yep. One more speaker.
I initially had thought that Jordan could hold the seat down for us, for both of us. But as a commissioner also, I have the privilege or the unprivilege of working in the Regions Bank building 50 years ago. And I was actually one of the officers that was able to move my location from the initial bank over to where Arnie's and so forth are. And I can remember in staff meetings multiple times the changes that we had to make because the walls that they started to put together so we could move the other departments, there were secret walls, or there were walls between the walls, and there were issues, and multiple times back in back in the early 70s when we were remodeling the building as it sits today, there were all kinds of other things that were the unknown that they had to deal with and we had to deal with, and it actually got put back in time. It took, initially it was going to be done by X number of days, and then it was 180 days further out because of this issue, and then it was another 180 days out because of this issue. And so structurally wise, we were not as a bank able to move over as quickly as we could because of the many things that happened. That's number one. In 2012, when I was a commissioner, I became aware that the bank was going to go up for sale at that point in time in that location. And at that time, I was 100% that we should buy that building then. And I'm 100% saying that we should buy it today. The location and so forth for this courthouse and for our people is just common sense. You know, we don't have to drive a distance. We don't have an issue going back and forth. It's right across the street. So as an annex of the courthouse, it just makes sense one way or the other to obviously purchase that and continue to do what we're doing. But it's going to take some updating and some changes, in fact, and that's where we're at today. For 20%, and my guess is that we're going to save more than that because it's just, there's going to be issues that we would have faced with the other way, Dale, as you mentioned. So, you know, yes, we're going to continue to grow. If you look at Indianapolis and Zionsville and Fishers and all of the traffic that has come our direction in the past 20 years, 20 years ago I drove to Indianapolis and there was not all of that going on, and as it is right now, the next 20 years, it's going to be in our county. We're going to be having that continual growth of many things. Boone County today is struggling because they don't have enough facilities to take care of all the movement, and it's going to continue to come this way. So in the next 20 years is what we're looking at. And, you know, this building, I think, Mike, you asked how long is that going to last? And of course, Dale says he can't, nobody could really say how long. But this building's been here a long time. And so if we put it in steel and modern positions today, it's going to last hopefully as long as what we're talking about that this building's been involved with. So, you know, nobody wants to take on the additional cost. Nobody wants to take on additional expense. But operationally wise, it's only making sense for us to look forward for the next 20 years. So by far, it's the way to go for us today. And I thank you guys for considering it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Weaver.
Does anybody else wish to speak for or against the project tonight?
Well, if I could say something.
Yes, please.
Well, I appreciate Commissioner Weaver's comment of 2012. For the people that want private, something in that building, and that building was for sale for years. And I always wanted, since I'm a private businessman, I was hoping somebody would get in there too. And so I'm glad that you brought up 2012. That sat a long time and nothing happened. So I'm glad that this is finally taking, I'm 100% supportive, just like everybody else. But I wanted to say thanks for bringing that up.
Seeing and hearing no other comment, I'll close the public hearing portion of the meeting tonight. And at this point, I want to bring to your attention and introduce the actual resolution that we will consider for adoption at our next hearing, after the next hearing on February 14th. And that resolution is 2023-01, and its title is a resolution making a determination of need for two separate projects and making a preliminary determination to enter into a lease agreement and authorizing circulation of taxpayer petition and ordering of appraisals. Try to say that 3 times.
Yeah.
But now we can consider that that resolution introduced. We'll bring it up again in February. We'll have another hearing just like this where the public will have an opportunity to speak and give feedback. And at that point in time, we'll actually take action and vote on that determination, which would lead us to the next step. So, yes.
Is the number 2023 or 2022?
It is 2023. We discovered that as an error here
Okay.
earlier this evening. So 2023-01.
Thank you. Wasn't sure if my ears were going or my eyes.
All right. Zach, anything else that I need to cover tonight? Okay. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for all taking the time to attend. Thank you to our speakers for the great presentation and explanation tonight. Any last comments, questions from the council?
I think it's a great idea and fully support it.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else?
I agree. I looked at the building a couple years ago for Healthy Communities, and there just seemed to be too many things that we could not afford to take on that building because of the same issues, so.
Thank you all that may have watched online, and as I mentioned earlier, we do have information packets that are available that if you'll reach out to the auditor's office, you could get either a physical copy or I'm sure we could scan and email a copy of those numbers. So thank you again for coming, and we'll possibly see you again in February. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay.
Dale,
Very good.
I have a question for you.
As smooth as I could have imagined.
Yeah. You know, Dan stepping up there, hitting it out of the park right off the bat.
Yeah, he did.